We held a similar briefing this morning for legislators, and the idea of this session is to get you all a little more comfortable with the budget process, and get you thinking about some of the asks that we're going to have in front of legislators over the next couple of months as they go through the budget process. Well, I'm going to skip those slides. That was from this morning. That was about the caucus. We're going to focus on the collaborative and our allied organizations work right now. So this is to give you a sense of the calendar of the budget process. And believe it or not, the budget process is the exciting time of the legislative session because things actually happen fast in relative terms. You know, how bills can take many, many years to pass, but the budget has to happen every year. So when there's an ask for a bill, for instance, it's often a repeated ask over a course of many years of asking people to reach out to legislators. The budget is a much more compressed timeline. It happens over the course of just a few months. And it's laid out roughly like what you see in front of you here. The governor puts out a budget in January. And since it's really the legislature that starts the process, the governor's budget is more suggestion than anything else. I think the legislature pays a lot of attention to his budget in terms of administration, as far as looking at agencies and staffing levels and things like that. But as far as policy priorities, it's really the legislature the legislature's budgets that really matter. So we're in April now, and the House budget process is starting this week. The House Committee on Ways and Means gets to have first cut at this, and they've been developing their draft budget over the last couple of months. They do that. It's a relatively opaque process, but each representative gets a chance to meet with the chair of the Ways and Means Committee to talk about their top priorities and what they're most interested in seeing in the budget. And the Committee on Ways and Means aggregates all of that and puts out their first draft of the budget, and that's going to be this Wednesday. Legislators then have just a couple of days to file amendments, and these would be additional things that they can add to the budget that they'd like to have considered and ultimately voted on. Legislators usually submit a handful of amendments each. Usually there's a few that are local asks, things that might be money that's explicitly for a community center or a food pantry or a school or some other local organization or local need. Sometimes there's infrastructure asks about a new fire department, a firehouse or something like that. And they'll also submit things that are their priorities around statewide initiatives. So there might be amendments on things like HIP or MEFAP or other statewide programs, depending upon what's in the Ways and Means draft. Obviously, if there's something in the Ways and Means draft, there's no need to file an amendment for it. So that's why there's this waiting period where we're all wondering what's going to be in the Ways and Means draft. We've all been doing outreach and advocacy to try to get them to include things in that first draft. As soon as that draft comes out, everyone rushes and looks to see what's in there and what's not. And that's when we determine what we need to work with legislators to file amendments for. So those amendments will have to be filed by the end of this week. There's usually about 1,000 or so amendments filed. And then there's a week, which will be next week, where that's when we're going to be calling on you. That's when advocates really get engaged and start reaching out to legislators, asking them to co-sponsor amendments and making legislators, in this case, representatives, aware of the amendments that are particularly important to you. And we'll send out emails and there'll be stuff on our website with information about what the food system priorities are. And then the following week is when they debate, and the House will meet first in closed session to have some internal discussions, and then ultimately we'll put together all the amendments into some packages and pass the ones that have the most support. So you can see what I mean by it being a fast turnaround process here. This is really just a 1 week period where we really get to reach out to legislators as much as possible to make them aware of and get their support for some key items that we'll have amendments filed for. So after all that's done, we get to do the exact same thing all over again on the Senate side. And the Senate Ways and Means Committee does the same thing that the House does. Hopefully they pay some attention to the version that the House did. And that happens, we don't have the exact dates for this one, but it'll be sometime around the 9th of May. Again, amendments will have a few days to be filed. Again, there's a week in between the amendment filing deadline and the debate, and then they debate and they try to finish it up by the end of May. And the two budgets are never identical, the House budget and the Senate budget. And so ultimately what happens then is 3 members from each chamber are appointed to a conference committee. They pull together all of the various discrepancies between the two budgets and hammer out a compromise deal. That ultimately gets passed hopefully by mid-June. Constitutionally, the budget has to be done by June 30th, but constitutionally, the legislature can give themselves an extension. They get that budget to the governor. The governor has 10 days to sign it, and then that becomes law. There's other little details in there, but that's the broad overall picture of it. So the dates to be thinking about and the times to be looking out for emails and alerts are really those the weeks following those amendment filing deadlines. So again, it's going to be next week for the House, and it's going to be sometime around the week of the 13th or shortly thereafter for the Senate. So that's the overall process. This is what we're calling this year's food security budget. We're going to talk about all of these different items on this session. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. We're going to dig into each of them. And if you go to the Collaborative's website to our legislative activities page, you'll see at the bottom our letter to the legislature, which includes details about all of our asks, as well as about the asks of other organizations that you're going to hear from this afternoon. So that's the overview. I'm going to start talking about some of the details of our asks and then turn it over to some of my colleagues and from some other organizations to talk about theirs. So to start with, our priority asks include first off, the Healthy Incentives Program, which has been one of our top priorities for the last 5 years. We're asking for $20 million this year. That's an increase over last year, which was $13 million. The program continues to see high use and growing use. There's many areas of the state that are still underserved by the program, particularly gateway cities, particularly communities of color, and particularly farmers of color have really been shut out of the program. And we want this much money because we want to make sure that the department, DTA, doesn't have any reason to say we can't add new farmers, because we really think new vendors are critical to making the program serve the community as equitably as possible. We also want to make sure that we don't go back to having suspensions as we did a few years in a row before last year. And we want to be able to see the program continue to grow. So we're asking for $20 million for HIP this year. We have legislators signed up to file amendments if it doesn't appear at that level in the Ways and Means draft. UMass Extension, this is the second year that we're asking for funds for UMass Extension. We're asking for $620,000. That's about half of what we asked for last year. Last year we didn't succeed, and so we're hoping that a smaller number is met with more favor this year. UMass Extension has been around for over 100 years and is the most reliable, objective, science-based source for technical assistance and education for farmers, as well as others in natural resources industries. Despite the fact that the number of farms has steadily grown over the last couple of decades, the number of staff at UMass Extension has steadily decreased, and the amount of dollars in terms of resources has steadily decreased. So we're asking for resources that would allow them to hire 4 new staff members, one focused on integrated pest management to help reduce the amount of pesticides going into the air and water, one staff person to focus solely on urban agriculture, which is one of the fastest growing agricultural sectors in the state. One to work on pollinators. We all know what's happening with bees. and one to work on in the soil lab. The soil lab provides analysis to farmers and other land professionals, and has been sorely underfunded and under-resourced for many years. So that's the UMass Extension ask, $620,000 there. It would be funded through an earmark in the MDAR budget. A new program that we're proposing in this year's budget is a new grant program, also to be administered by MDAR, for $250,000 grants that would go to local food policy councils. There's about 24 local food policy councils around the state. They provide essential networking for everyone from farmers to food pantries to distributors to restaurants, and really stepped up during the pandemic and demonstrated that they can really provide some vital resources when needed to help make sure that their communities are fed. So that's a new grant program. We're asking for $250,000. Food Security Infrastructure Grant Program. Lots of you are familiar with this program already. This has been funded through bond funding for the last 2 years. It started in 2020 as a response to COVID with $36 million, and Governor Baker put $15 million from his capital budget into it this year. But it's altogether has been able to fund about 17% of the total requests. It's tremendously oversubscribed, and we want to see more resources go into that program. This is for capital costs for everyone in the food system, essentially, ranging from farms that need cultivating or washing equipment to food pantries that are asking for refrigeration, to schools that are asking for cooking equipment. It's been a tremendously successful program, and it's really been underfunded so far. So we're asking for $30 million for that program. And finally, we're asking for $300,000 for additional MDAR staffing. MDAR also really stepped up during the pandemic and has had to do things like administer this massive food security infrastructure grant program, as well as administer lots of other funds that have come in from USDA, and has had to do so without any increased capacity. As a result, contracts have been really slow. Communications has been not as strong as it could have been. And in general, the department is really stretched very thin. And the governor did not ask for any increase in administration costs for the department for this year. So we're asking for $300,000 additional for MDAR staffing. So we're tying all of these together by talking about each of these items with legislators in terms of these are all in service to two very key priorities for the state: food security and climate resilience. You hear the governor, you hear the legislature, you hear legislative leaders talk about the need for food security and climate resilience. All of these asks and all of the asks that you're going to hear from other organizations about next are all in service to those two needs. And so I'd encourage people, when you're doing outreach, when you're talking to legislators about these things, remind them these aren't just fringy ideas, these aren't new ideas, these are things that we're calling out as really essential to meeting some of the state's goals around food security and climate resilience. So those are the collaborative's 5 asks. I'm going to pass it on now, and we're going to hear from 5 different organizations, starting with Kelly Coleman from CISA, and she's going to talk about the buy locals. Kelly.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. So I am here to talk a little bit about the funding that supports buy local organizations across the state that has been in the state budget for over 15 years. We're asking this year for $750,000, which is level funding from last year, and it supports over 9 organizations across the state of Massachusetts who all engage in consumer awareness building through buy local campaigns. These organizations, you can see on the map, are listed there. In addition to increasing consumer awareness and increasing demand for locally grown food by communicating directly to the public through marketing and outreach, all these organizations also do work to help let the public know about the bigger issues impacting agriculture through public forums, education, public outreach, etc. And we invite community members to directly engage to support farms and local agriculture and food system policy. In addition, all 9 of these groups, to varying degrees, take on works to directly support farmers, providing technical assistance and training to help them in farm businesses, development, and marketing, among other topics. And all these organizations do work to support increasing food access to local food, primarily through supporting the Healthy Incentives Program, but several groups also run their own local incentive programs at their farmers market or with farms in their communities, or do direct food delivery programs to make sure that food is available to members of their community with low income or low access to local food. Like I said, state funding has been really critical in supporting this work and allowing it to really get off the ground and build some momentum. National research suggests that areas that have an active buy local campaign regularly see more robust sales, even when the economy is weakened. And we have certainly seen during the pandemic that the existing support for local agriculture and awareness about local agriculture really translated into increased sales for local farms, and farms were with the support of buy local organizations and were able to quickly pivot to provide consumers with access to local food. They were offering curbside pickup or online delivery, delivery and online ordering, a whole range of services that allowed our local food system to really step up when the national supply chain and social distancing really impacted our ability to access food and through other more traditional means. So this ongoing state support has really set the stage for that and allowed all of these organizations to build up the network and connections that allowed the community to access local food throughout the pandemic. We saw demand for local food rise tremendously during the pandemic, and since new, more traditional channels have expanded again as we wound down social distancing, we are seeing that demand for local food is softening, and so it's really essential that we continue to be out in communicating to the public about why, how, and where to support local farmers. This work is vital for the local food economy and has really tremendous impact across the Commonwealth. We have run some numbers and have shown that if every household in the state of Massachusetts shifts $5 of their food budget towards local food, that would result in nearly $80 million being redistributed in the local economy, and over 1,500 jobs within the food system, and would provide over 250 million servings of fresh local food. So this year we are asking the House and the Senate to support the level funding of $750,000 in the state budget that in the Department of Ag Resources. The Food System Collaborative also includes a small request that CISA is behind, which is a request for $75,000 in the Department of Elder Affairs that goes to support a program called Senior Farm Share. That program provides seniors with low incomes with a small share of the harvest through the height of the summer that's delivered directly to senior center sites and to senior housing sites to make sure that our seniors with low incomes still have access to fresh local food. I will have my contact information at the end and welcome any questions. So that's it.
Thanks, Kelly. Next up are some asks from Project Bread and Jen Lemmerman.
Thanks, Winton. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jen Lemmerman. I am the Vice President of Public Policy at Project Bread, and we are a statewide anti-hunger organization that works to address food insecurity happening now through some direct service programs, a couple of which I'll talk about in a second, while at the same time advocating for policies to remove barriers that perpetuate food insecurity in our state. We have 4 requests through the state budget process this year, 2 of which are in response to the need in schools around school meals And the other two are programs, our own direct service programs that have been funded in the state budget for many years. The first is to extend universal school meals here in the state. Many of you probably know that right now every child in the country is receiving free school meals. It's a COVID response program that was passed at the federal level. It is set to expire on June 30th of this year. And Congress has been unable, although they have tried, and there is a lot of support for continuing the program, Congress has been unable to get over their political hurdles to do that. And so all indications are that as of July 1, that program will end. The concern is that food insecurity is still very high. This program has been incredibly successful, and the need is still very much there. So it was the number one source of food for families during the pandemic. There are 400,000 kids in our state that will lose access to free school meals on July 1st of this year. And we know it worked. There was a 40% increase in kids participating in school meals who are eating school meals during this program. And we heard from schools that it was a huge success for them. The administrative burden of categorizing kids into free, reduced, or paid, and collecting fees, and all of the things that go along with our current meal system outside of these waivers has been successful for schools. And so all of that reverts back as of July 1, unless the legislature acts to extend it. So we are asking them for a 1-year extension of that program at a cost of $110 million. The next one is a more long-term request. We're asking that the legislature pass an outside section, which would change the law and would eliminate that reduced price category. So those 3 tiers that we have, there's that middle category of kids who pay a copay. It's something that, they're sort of deemed that, in a category that they need support, but they don't get to have free. And it is administratively very burdensome. Additionally, a lot of the school meal debt that we see in our state comes from this category because these are families that need the support. 20,000 kids would no longer have to pay that fee and would just be pulled into the free category. There are 13 states who have already done this, and it would pull in federal dollars. So while it would cost the state $1.8 million up front, they would $900,000 more federal money would come into the state because of our participation in this. The next two are the Project Bread programs that have been funded through the budget. The Child Nutrition Outreach Program is in partnership with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We work directly with schools and summer meal sites to increase participation in those federal nutrition programs and make sure that kids have food where they are at all year long. This program has pivoted many times over the last 2 years, just like the schools and the summer meal sites have, with COVID restrictions and sort of the environment that they've had to serve food in. We are asking for an increase to $700,000 this year. The increase is to bring on additional staff so we can go to more communities and to rebrand it so that we can reach more kids and have more participation in these federally reimbursed programs. And then finally, the Food Source Hotline. The Food Source Hotline is a toll-free, fully confidential information and referral service. I'm putting the number in the chat. And please always feel free to share it. Anyone can call, and through a language line, we can serve people in 180 languages and provide information on a number of programs, including SNAP, WIC, where their nearest meal site is, where their nearest food pantry is, and what the hours are. We've been operating since COVID on a very increased level of need and expect that to continue. We're also adding some bilingual counselors so that we can provide, bypass the language line in those languages and have that direct one-on-one, as well as introducing some new ways for people to reach out for help. And I think that's it. Thanks, Winton.
Thank you, Jen. Next up, Mass Farm to School, and I believe it's Simca.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much, Winton. Hi, everyone. Simca Horowitz with Mass Farm to School. So Mass Farm to School works to get more local food and food education into schools across the state. And what we're looking for in this year's budget is level funding of $120,000. This is funds that go through the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources and support our team to provide training and technical assistance that is for schools to help them really navigate how to do more local purchasing and do things like scratch cooking with local foods. It's also worked directly with farmers and producers and like food hubs and food distributors to help them better serve the school market. And so this is really both about economic development and about healthy food access and education. And I think in particular, as we've seen so many of the supply chain challenges during COVID, and as Jen was explaining, like the real increased reliance on school meals for keeping kids healthy, we really see that there's great opportunity for schools to be meeting more of their food needs with local sourcing, but still a lot of them needing the training and support to be able to do that effectively and efficiently. So that is what this primarily funds, and also is really a great complement to a new grant program that the state is establishing this year with some of the COVID relief funds. That's a farm to school grant program for both K through 12 schools, as well as early education and care sites, to provide grants directly to them for infrastructure needs, training, professional development, and other education activities that help them either start up or expand their farm to school programs. And so our training and technical assistance is really complementary as well to anyone who may be a grant recipient and really looking to get a program underway and would have the funds to do so. And this would provide additional training and support for them to put those funds to good use. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Simca. Next up is MeFAP, and from the food banks, I believe Catherine Lynn is here. Catherine?
Hi, Winston, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I want to just thank the collaborative for taking the time to have this session to go over all the policy and budget priorities. And I'm sorry, I'm calling in from a place with a little bit of a scratchy internet, so I apologize if I go in and out, but I am here. I am the Vice President of Communications and Public Affairs for the Greater Boston Food Bank, here speaking on behalf of the 4 food banks, which make up the Food Bank Coalition of Massachusetts, the Merrimack Valley Food Bank, the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts, Greater Boston Food Bank, and Worcester County Food Bank. I think it should go without saying, but we are supportive of all of the budget priorities this morning or today that have been reviewed, but I am here to speak specifically to the Massachusetts Emergency Food Assistance Program, otherwise known as MeFAP. And our request is to level fund the program at $30 million in the FY23 state budget. Just as a reminder for folks, this is a state line item that provides funding to the 4 food banks to purchase food for distribution. The Greater Boston Food Bank manages the contract with the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture, and we do all the purchasing for the state. But we work really collaboratively and closely with all 4 food banks in sourcing that food. Last year, the food bank served an average of 831,000 clients per month. That was on average. If you were to look at month to month, those numbers varied greatly between each of our 4 service areas and across different regions. But I think what's important to note is that regardless of sort of discrepancies and across the state, none of us have seen a dip below pre-COVID and pre-pandemic levels. And I'll just give an example for the Greater Boston Food Bank. We serve about 70% of the food insecure population for the state. And we saw a 60% increase in clients served by our partner agencies in June 2020. And that number really has not subsided. And And so overall, we've had some variations, but especially in the last couple of months, we've had a number of clients returning or new clients that had left and then are coming back because of the high cost in food and gas and other utilities, making it harder for individuals and families to get back on their feet and continue their recovery to an economic sound place. One other I skipped over, but just I think an important point, all 4 food banks, we serve about 1,000 meal programs, pantries, shelters, mobile markets across the state. And this food that's purchased by BFAP goes to all of those programs. I think an important piece is that it's a critical source of food that stabilizes our overall food supply. It's not the only food that we're distributing. We also distribute TFAP food, and then in some cases, purchasing our own food from food bank to food bank. Last year in FY20, we were really fortunate to receive a $10 million increase to the program, and that a couple quick stats is that we were about 47% of MFAP vendors were mass-based last year. 39% of the funds were spent locally through farms, manufacturers, or vendors. And then we were able to increase our mass-grown purchasing by 53%. We provided a total of 163 different core food items through mass-grown, 70 through mass-grown, 77 different types of fresh produce, poultry, dairy items were provided through MFAP. And we added several new vendors, including 2 local seafood vendors, the Cape Cod Fishermen's Association, Boston Sword and Tuna. These were new programs and a new initiative to support local seafood industry, and we're increasing that purchasing for this year as well. Bottom line, the total as a result of that $10 million increase was all 4 food banks distributed a total of about 35 million pounds of food, or the equivalent of about 29 million meals statewide. That was a 25% increase and a total of 7 million more meals due to the increase in MFAP funding. This was incredibly critical, and I think the last 2 points I'll just end on is, I think number 1, really important to note that the food bank emergency food system is really a one piece of addressing food insecurity in the state. We are the food security safety net to the federal nutrition safety net, and when anything goes wrong or benefits expire, there's a cliff effect that puts a lot more pressure on our food system. I want to commend the pantries and the meal programs and all the staff and volunteers across the state that have really stepped up. They are resilient and strong, but they are tired. And I think we're really concerned about some of the cliff effects that may come about in the next couple of months. And I'll just underscore what Jen had said and others have said around ensuring that we continue and extend nutrition benefits. If we can extend some school meals here in the state, I think that would be very, very helpful because we're under a lot of pressure as it is. And we're not asking for more than $30 million this year, even with all of the factors that we know because of capacity restraints on the food bank system. And then the last thing I'll just say, speak about the capacity piece is we are experiencing the same impact from inflation, increased food prices, gas prices on our operations, but also obviously clients as well. And so there's a lot of environmental factors that we're facing. I think we've been talking a lot amongst ourselves at the food bank with partners that we're almost, the last 2 years have been hard, but the next several are going to be even harder in addressing and dealing with the ongoing recovery and these economic impacts that are facing us. So that makes MFAP that much more critical. Our fundraising is dipping. TFAP food is dipping, USDA food, and so NEFAP is a critical local source of funding for us. So thank you. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email me or any of the other food banks. I can put our contact in the chat.
Thanks, Catherine. And then to talk about the Mass Food Trust and Mass in Motion is Alexis Walsh from MPHA. Alexis?
Thanks, Winton. Thanks for hosting this today. And thank you to all the presenters for just sharing more about some of your asks. I just second what Catherine shared and just thanking everyone for being on the call today to just learn more about how to take action and what some of the critical asks this fiscal year are. As Winton mentioned, my name is Alexis Walls, and I work with the Massachusetts Public Health Association. We are a statewide nonprofit that does public health policy advocacy. And so while we work on a range of issues, we recognize access to healthy, affordable food as a critical social determinant of health. And so I just want to share with you all today briefly about two of the asks that we have for the fiscal year 23 budget. So for the first, I just want to talk briefly about the Massachusetts Food Trust. For those who don't know, the Food Trust is a program that provides loans, grants, and business assistance to new and expanding healthy food retailers and local food enterprises. The goals of this program are to increase access to healthy, affordable food and jobs in low and moderate income areas. And this program was actually started with seed funding from the Baker administration in 2018 and in partnership with MDAR. And so I just want to share a few accomplishments of this program. To date, the Food Trust has funded 48 projects across 10 counties and has created 678 jobs and increased access to healthy food for over 225,000 people. I also just want to flag that this program has also helped to complement other sources of food funding within the state. During the pandemic, the Food Trust was actually able to support some of the smaller food organizations and businesses that received food security infrastructure grants. So because many of those grants used a reimbursement model and a lot of smaller orgs didn't necessarily have upfront capital, the Food Trust was able to help step in and provide no interest loans to those projects so that they had the capital in hand that was needed right away. And so this year, what we're asking the legislature for is that the Food Trust be level funded at $300,000, sorry, not 300 million, $300,000 in the fiscal year 23 budget. And just so that folks know, that funding provides operating dollars to the two community development institutions, which is sort of like mission-driven banks. So it provide operating funds for those banks that run the program. And so that's sort of our big ask for Mass in Motion. The second that I just want to mention is, or sorry, not Mass in Motion, the Food Trust. The second ask that I want to talk about is Mass in Motion. And I noticed that there are a few people who coordinate Mass in Motion programs on the call today. So hello, and thanks to all the work that you all are doing. Mass in Motion is a Massachusetts Department of Public Health program that funds communities in regions across the Commonwealth to address root causes of preventable chronic conditions by promoting equity in social determinants of health. And so Mass in Motion grantees do this by working with people across sectors in their community to create opportunities for safe physical activity and healthy and affordable food access. And so to date, Mass in Motion has begun to make positive changes to policies and living conditions across 70 cities, towns, and neighborhoods in Mass. And the program has also helped leverage over 18 million to improve health. Just some quick examples of grantee projects. Some Mass in Motion coordinators have worked to help adopt zoning and regulations that support community agriculture. Some of the efforts have have met low-income residents where they are by making affordably priced, healthy food available in community spaces like health centers. And there's also been a lot of work around increasing opportunities for active living. And so an example of that is implementing safe routes to school initiatives so that there's the infrastructure and policies needed to support youth and kids in walking and biking to and from school. And so just a quick note that this program is shifting the model just a little bit within the next fiscal year. And so DPH is going to be funding fewer programs, but at a higher rate so that Mass in Motion communities can have a greater, deeper impact in communities, while also supporting communities that have been funded and just ensuring some of that work continues to be sustained. And so this fiscal year, we are asking that the legislature maintain language around funding for the Mass in Motion program in fiscal year 23, so that it's consistent with fiscal year 22. And this would just essentially ensure that the program receives no less money than it did in the previous fiscal year. So that's what I wanted to share with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexis. And I'll just make the link between the Mass in Motion notes and the earlier ask that I talked about around grants for food policy councils. As Alexis mentioned, the formula for funding for for Mass in Motion is changing this year. It's going to be the same amount of money, but it's going to be larger grants to fewer municipalities. There's a lot of overlap between Mass in Motion networks and local food policy councils, and that's one of the reasons there's such a need for additional funding for local food policy councils. So there's a real connection there. I want to go back to a slide for a minute. This that I jumped over earlier. This is while I'm talking, if anyone who presented, if you haven't put your email address in the chat yet, please do so folks know how to get in touch with you. These are slides from this morning's presentation to legislators, and I want to highlight them because these are slides put together by the Food System Caucus, Legislative Food System Caucus, and presented by Representative Kane this morning and talking to all of her colleagues. And you can see that their top 4 priorities are HIP, MEFAP, UMass Extension, and the local food policy councils. And then the other ones that they're supporting is basically everything else that you just heard about. So one of the questions that often comes up around this time is, does it really matter when we do advocacy, when we talk to legislators? Well, yes. If you look at this, the caucus's letter is almost verbatim a match with the requests that you've heard from all of us today. And that's a testament to all of the outreach that you all have done over the years in elevating these issues and making legislators aware. So a caucus now that represents more than 2/3 of the full legislature is now championing all the same issues that matter the most to you and your members and your communities. So point being, advocacy matters. And so we need to keep that up. Just because the caucus sent this letter and supported all of this doesn't mean that it's all a done deal. And as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of emails coming to all of you from all of us very soon once amendments get filed and there's opportunities to call and talk to legislators. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other. And we've got some time yet. So if folks have questions, you can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand. You can unmute yourself and shout out. We all know how this works by now. Liz.
Hey, y'all. Hi, all my friends that I know and my friends that I don't. I just want to put in a plug for, want to support Alexis and put in a plug for Mass in Motion, because the 2 coordinators that we've had over the years, Nicole Borden, some of you know, she's at the Community Foundation of Western Mass now, and Benjamin Bland, have each served on the Food Policy Council. Our Food Policy Council hasn't received any funding, but their support and work has been just invaluable. And I think putting people's names behind the position sometimes makes it more real to us. The team in Hampshire County, Caitlin Marquise and Clark Bankert, also do just really incredible work and are solid friends to Springfield, even though they're in Hampshire County, and Rachel Stoller, who's even farther out. These are real people working in the food system, advocating for everything that we all care about. So I just wanted to tag that for you, because sometimes we don't, this is policy and it's all wonky, and that these are about human beings who are helping us do policy and be all wonky. And then I always have to say something about HIP, because it is, I think, one of the things, I think it's really equitable. And it came out of Springfield and Holyoke. Black and brown people made HIP happen with Franco Nochito. Those of you who've been around for a while will remember him. And so we don't talk about it in that framework enough. Well, I do, but the rest of people don't. And it's really important to understand that really good policy can come out of the most marginalized communities, and that we're not just sitting around waiting for handouts. And now lots of folks eat better because of HIP, and lots of white farmers are rich because of HIP. And we need to keep, I don't begrudge people doing well financially. I just want it to all be really equitable, but I want you to understand that HIP has the potential to put all kinds of dollars in the economy, even if you're just thinking about it for money. So I know I'm talking to the choir, but I miss talking to the choir.
Hey, Marty, can I put you on the spot? There's a question in the chat from Ed about soil health. Do you want to explain where last year's funding went, and why, how you're pursuing funding this year, or if?
Sure, absolutely. And well, I did want to say, first of all, thank you to all the presenters. It's really great to hear all the positive intersections that we're working together. And I'm really happy to see the inclusion and that the Food Caucus is behind supporting extension, especially with, if folks don't know, I'm the policy director of NOFA Mass, Northeast Organic Farming Association of Massachusetts, and healthy soils and pollinator protection are like right at the top of the policy work that we do. So it's great to see that included, and I will be advocating as much as we can for that in this budget. And so, yeah, so for the healthy soils programs in Massachusetts, we were able to secure I say a seed amount of funding last cycle. We were currently going out trying to get a larger slice of the environmental infrastructure funding from ARPA. But really, that actually I didn't see the question, but the question is like, what's happening with that funding, or where's it going?
He just asked anything for soil health.
Right. Well, I mean, I would say yes. Certainly having a healthy soils educator at Extension and increasing the soil lab capacity. I mean, that's why we're supporting that, especially having I forget how you put it, Winton, but having a science-based objective authority on healthy soils practices could be really important for all farmers to have as a resource, especially with changing climate, having localized expertise available. And so having that educator there, having the lab equipment to update the UMass Extension's soil testing capabilities is going to be really important. And we're continuing to advocate for funding, like I said, from ARPA. And really, one of the major, I'd say, bottlenecks right now with Healthy Soils program in Massachusetts is the Healthy Soils Action Plan is still stuck in the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs office, and we hear it might be out anytime, but we've been hearing that for about a year now. And once that roadmap is released, that will provide guidance for the commission to develop the program and put to work some of the funds we've already allocated. And then I think we'll be in a better position to advocate for more funding. Hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Marty. Any other questions about any of the issues you heard about or about the process?
Winton, this is Kelly at CISA. Can you talk a little bit about how additional ARPA funding and the state budget interplay?
I can tell you what I think I understand, sure. Talking to various folks at the various Ways and Means Committee, various Ways and Means committees, has been a little bit of an interesting exercise. Everyone's got a different story about when the second round of ARPA funding is going to happen. ARPA, for a quick refresher, is the American Rescue Plan Act. It's the federal money. The state's getting billions of dollars, and the way the state has chosen to handle that was that they had a separate budget process back in November where they decided what to do with about half of it, and set the other half aside to deal with later. We had heard at one point that it was going to happen very early this year, and then we heard that it might happen in the fall, and we heard that it might happen early next year. And there's some others of you who are on this call who talk to legislators a lot may have heard some of the same stories. And there's not a clear answer right now. That money is one-time money. It has to be spent by 2027, I believe. Mid-2027 is the current date, although they often push those dates back. It's meant to be explicitly around capital costs, infrastructure and things like that. Although they did use quite a bit of it for relief money from the first round. The legislators who are advocating for holding off on it, their point is that there's a lot of money floating around right now. USDA has put out a lot of money through Build Back Better and ARPA. Other agencies have as well. There's the infrastructure bill. And waiting to see where all that money lands will mean the state's a little bit more aware of where the gaps are that need to be filled. Obviously, on the other side is that money's needed now. Those investments are needed now. And despite the fact that the first round of money was decided back in December, it's only just now starting to go out the door. So it's not directly related to the fiscal year 23 budget. It's going to be a separate budget process, and we don't know when. And given that we're in the thick of the operating budget process right now, I'd be surprised if it happens before the fall. At the same time, the formal session of the legislature ends on July 31st. It's an election year. They're all going to be quite busy in the fall. I'm not going to make a prediction, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happened at the beginning of the next legislative session. Anyone else who has conversations with the powers that be who want to weigh in on this, if you've got further insights, please do. Jen Lemmerman's smiling like she knows something, or she's just equally frustrated.
I am just equally frustrated with it.
Other questions, thoughts, concerns? Everyone excited to advocate for a good budget this year? Everyone going to respond to emails and call your legislators? Even if they're already good legislators, calling them matters. It really makes them pay attention. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everyone turning out. We will let everyone know when the videos of this has been posted on YouTube, so you all can share it with all your friends, and look for lots of emails from us over the